Father Peter has given me the privilege of inaugurating this session here, and I just have some more casual reflections on this topic of the priest as PR agent, public relations. I think the whole notion of the priest and our role, when the priest is present, the church is present. Let's be candid. When we're there, the church is there. The church is manifest through the fact that we are in holy orders, serving the church in this capacity in persona Christi, pastoring communities. The church is present when the priest is present. And so are the churches and schools that he leads. This is not rocket science, this is obvious, but it's just enough to say that it's important for us to realize that a ministry of presence is incredibly important. When we're there, people do listen. We're able to articulate the mission. We're able to articulate our theology, our belief, our convictions, whether it be about the institution for which we work and for which we minister, for which we pastor. It is important to utilize that office, that role, to maximize our potential to articulate who we are, what we're about, what we stand for, what our goals are. And quite frankly, we have lots of publics within which we can, navigate our way through. The priest in public is really a walking billboard in many ways. And it can be simple things like when we go to restaurants and we go to the grocery store and we go to banks. I'm not a particular fan of having to, be in full clerical attire when I go to a baseball game or a Miami Dolphins game. But I will have to say, in my normal course of the day-to-day living, to go to even these things like restaurants, grocery stores, and banks, it's amazing how those things, because they see, oh, are you Father Davis from St. Gregory? Yes, I am. Oh, that's great. I heard about your school. And it opens up a conversation. And before too long, it's amazing the recruitment and sponsorship potentials that begin to emerge, let alone the witness to the faith. I've even been on a plane where the pilot, as well as a passenger, later contacted me. One just wanted to find the church to go to that was nearby the airport, and I happened to be that. And but then the other actually heard me talking about the school, and ended up that she joined our parish and had her daughter matriculate in our school. You just never know what witnessing opportunity there may be in terms of public relations and being out and around. Other things in terms of the priest being involved in more public matters that can witness to who you are, what we're about, and the institution that you represent. I've done many city council invocations. I've been at the mayor's breakfasts, the interfaith breakfast. I've done public relations for the church in other kinds of gatherings of teachers, even the South Florida Teachers Association, Public School Teachers Association. They wanted an invocation. I don't hesitate to say yes to invitations like that because it gives us an opportunity to be out there on the front line, people knowing who we are, the church is present, our institution's name is mentioned, the faith, the conviction, we're giving a conviction to the faith that we stand for. And so public relations for the church leads to support for other elements of even our own agenda. So they get to know us, they're interacting with us, they're hearing us speak, they're present where we are, they hear about our institution. Before too long, you've got somebody saying, well, I work for a fencing company and I work for, a security company and I work for this and I'm a retired police officer, I'm a retired FBI. And before too long, now you've got people that are working on your security system for you at the school, and you've got, other resources that may well be coming your way. So again, in one sense, this isn't rocket science. This is just about us being remembering that we are very public men of the church, and that when we are present, the church is present, and the institutions that we represent are present.
What about Rotary Club or Chamber of Commerce?
Surely options. Surely options. They're almost infinitesimal, the number of options there may be for us to be present. We look for invitations. Sometimes we have to be proactive and creative and figure out how to get ourselves invited to certain things so that we can access certain constituencies. Whether it be our own Knights of Columbus other kinds of organizations that are affiliated or loosely affiliated with the church. It gives us a forum in which to address people and to rally support for our cause. So honestly, I think by way of summary, and my comments are brief, and it's just that to say it's called a ministry of presence. It's just being out there, it's being around. And it has everything to do with the ministry of presence in the school and outside of the school. But when we're talking about the priest as public relations agent, we are an ambassador for our cause, and we're a billboard on 2 feet. And it gives us an opportunity to impact many and perhaps rally many to support our cause.
Well, you're only getting about 10% of your salary.
Thank
I
That's powerful.
First, Father Davis is talking about being the public face. From 80 to 85, I worked for the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights. And the founder was a crusty old Jesuit, Virgil Bloom, who was a professor of constitutional law. And he established the organization in 1973. Interestingly, in 1953, in a kitchen in St. Louis, he established Citizens for Educational Freedom, which was an attempt to begin the conversation about school choice. And 20 years later, he founded the Catholic League, and he brought me on board when I was a young cub. I think I was 29 when I came on board with him. And he made the point constantly that the Catholic League was essentially a lay organization with a lay voice and a lay face, except when it wasn't. And for certain issues, he said, no, I want the Roman collar up in front. So for example, when President Reagan wanted to reestablish diplomatic relations with the Holy See, and remember that was reestablishing because they had been, right? And when, the marble block of Pius IX was thrown into the Potomac, that kind of ended diplomatic relations for a while. And when that issue came up, the U.S. Bishops' Conference did not want the reestablishment of diplomatic relations. That was the Bernardine era of the Bishops' Conference. And the word went out that no Catholic organization was to testify in favor of diplomatic restoration. And Father Bloom got a call from Russell Shaw, who was the only Catholic really working in the Bishops' Conference at the time. And he was the head of the communications office. And he called him and he said, got a call today from the Apostolic Delegate's office and another one from the president's office saying, this is really very embarrassing because it looks like one of two things. Either the Catholics think it's such a shoo-in that they won't even deign to participate in the process in the Senate confirmation hearings for the issue, or as a matter of fact, the Catholics don't want it and Reagan's trying to push this, right? And so Bloom said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, well, can anybody from your organization testify? And so Bloom called me and he said, would you do it? And I said, well, I would think this would be something you'd want a layperson to do. And he said, no. He said, when people want to hear about what the church says about something, he said, say all you want about the age of the laity. They want to see a Roman collar. And even the Jesuits learned that when they do fundraising for their horrible universities, they find a rabbi real quick, So you have to know when to use, if you're pushing something like school choice initiatives, you may well want parents to be the front for that rather than a priest. But for day-to-day operations, the Catholic culture is still, regardless of what Bergoglio says, it's a clerical culture. And the people want a priest leading the parade, right? So I'm just going to talk a bit about, for the most part, the PR role of the priest. Yeah.
So did you testify?
I did.
You did, okay, I wasn't aware of that. Amazing.
Well, that's another whole story. That's maybe with a vodka and martini afterwards.
Okay.
I mean, that was,
So you did go and present.
oh yeah, I'm in the congressional record, yeah. And it was, and we had an amazing opposition from within the church. Oh yeah, very, very vicious. And a very high-ranking churchman presently was one of the ones that was doing double duty as a sabotage agent, right?
Can you give us some clue why they didn't want it?
They didn't want a nuncio. They didn't want a high-profile presence of Rome in the American government or in within the church. Well, again, we're talking about Uncle Joe Bernardine. You know, he had his own version of the Catholic religion, and it didn't correspond to the one we had for 19 centuries before. Very powerful, very, very powerful. Right? And so I'm going to just kind of a hit and miss approach to different aspects of PR. First of all, within the Catholic community, particularly if you're a pastor in suburbia, we've heard this story for decades that yes, the Catholic schools are wonderful in the inner city and they're really needed there because the public schools are so horrible, etc. But in suburbia, they have wonderful, wonderful public schools and thousands of dollars per child is spent and so forth. Well, the truth of the matter is that's a myth. All right. The public schools in suburbia, although they spend tens of thousands of dollars, the education ain't that great. All right. There's a video which I've shown at previous seminars, and it's called Waiting for Superman. Good for you. See, it's good to have a recidivist in the crowd. Waiting for Superman documents the abysmal failure of the suburban government schools, right? And this hit home with me. For about 5 years, I did some adjunct teaching at a local community college in Ocean County, New Jersey, which is, upper middle class, and where the public school districts probably spend about $32,000 per kid, all right? And so I taught 3 different courses there. I taught philosophy, Latin, and world religions. The first part of it is rather interesting because my first day on campus, I'm walking across campus and I hear a kid say, "What happened? What happened?" We said, What? There's a priest, somebody die? Right? Because the whole idea that there would be a priest involved with education, just in another universe entirely. But I'll give you 3 examples from within those 3 courses. 1, in the political philosophy class, I began by saying, can anyone tell me the difference between a politician and a statesman? Lays, even before we had legal marijuana, And I said, all right, well, I'll make the question a little easier. There's a man who's generally acknowledged to have been a great statesman. I said, I have something against him for what he did to Eastern Europe, but I said, Winston Churchill. There were 32 kids in the class. Do you want to finish the statement? Not one had heard of Winston Churchill. All right, not one. In 2015, I began that same course by saying, this is the 8th centenary of the Magna Carta. Who? Magna Carta. I said, King John, Runnymede, English common law. Nada, niente, nickel.
Robin Hood?
Yeah, nothing. In the world religions course, when we got to Christianity, I asked them, who are the 4 evangelists? One kid thought it was a new rock group. In Latin, where you would presume that you're getting a little higher level, I always begin with review of English grammar, right, which they don't know, as proven by the story. So I said, who can name the parts of speech? Not a single kid in the class had heard the expression parts of speech. And then we finally got down to, I got nouns and verbs out of them, all right? An action word, C. Scott jump, whatever.
Yeah,
And then when I mentioned conjunctions, one kid thought it was a disease.
yeah.
This is the level of education in suburbia, all right? Now, in those 5 years, I only had 4 kids who were graduates of Catholic high schools, because 90% of the kids from Catholic high schools are not going to go to a community college. But the very first day they would come into class, I knew that they were Catholic school kids. First of all, they were actually dressed in a human fashion, right? They didn't have their pajamas on and everything else. Right? They would come and sit in the front row. They would open up a notebook and they would sit there waiting for things to start, right? The others, absolutely hopeless. And kids, I would say to the kids, there's a wonderful book, and there's a follow-up book called The Dumbest Generation. Any of you know Mark Bauerlein, who writes for First Things? He's a convert. He wrote The Dumbest Generation about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe, and it documents the absolute stupidity of the millennials, all right? And I always get a kick when grandparents say, oh, my grandson is so smart, what he can do with that computer. But he's stupid, okay? You can get a monkey to do with the computer, all right? They don't know anything, all right? And so Bauerlein has now a follow-up book, just came out, called The Dumbest Generation Grows Up. And the results, all right? And again, the abject stupidity. But I would say to these kids the first week, I said, look, you don't know much. Don't be insulted, it's not your fault. You've had your education stolen from you. If you want to play catch up, I'll be happy to play that game with you this semester. And kids would say, Father, where did you learn all that? Well, actually, I learned that in 4th grade or 5th grade. Yeah. Diagram sentences. Can you imagine? No. Nothing. All right. So the first thing you suburban pastors have to be aware of is be able to say clearly, education here ain't that great. All right. And we have something far better to offer. In a major archdiocese, which needs to remain nameless because I'm on video, there were state achievement exams that were taken by all kids in the state. But when the results were given, the Catholic school scores were not released. And when I questioned that, I was told that's because it's private schools and we have no right to distribute that information. Well, that sounds very noble. So I called the Archdiocesan Superintendent of the schools and I said, first of all, how did our kids do? And he said, oh, we blew everybody out of the water. In the inner city, in suburbia, blah, blah, blah. And I said, so are you going to write an article about that? Oh, no, Father. And please don't you do that either. We don't want to damage relationships with the public schools. I said, could you imagine if the shoe were on the other foot?
Oh, yeah.
And our scores were in the toilet? They'd be the first ones to say, you're paying tuition for that garbage? Get them out of there. Come to us. We're doing a better deal. So once again, we've met the enemy, and it is us. You know, and here's a superintendent who's being paid 6 figures, all right, to do what? So, number one, dispel that myth. Another that really gets to me is the stories that you hear, and you know, within the Catholic scheme of things, we can laugh at certain things, but when it becomes current beyond us, you have to watch for it. Is these stories about kids always getting beaten by nuns in the old days. And that sends me up the wall, all right? And I was on a plane one day and the guy sitting next to me says, you're a priest, you're a Catholic priest. I went to Catholic school for a while. You know where this is going. And I said, yeah, and he said, boy, those nuns, he said, they beat the hell out of me. And I said, well, sir, I said, I got to tell you, I had nuns for 13 years, 3 different orders, 2 different dioceses. I was never beaten, and I never saw anyone else beaten. I said, now, I certainly wouldn't want to call you a liar. I can't say what your experience was, but let me ask you this. If it's true that the nuns beat you up, did you deserve it? And he said, oh God, I was terrible. I said, well, listen, the next time you tell the story, would you please do this? Say, the nuns beat me up because I was a little bastard. He said, oh. And that kind of froze the conversation for the next 3 hours, right? Now, I must say this, I had the Sisters of Charity of Mother Seton from kindergarten to 5th grade, and they all had a paddle in the room on the bulletin board. And it said, the Board of Education applies to the seat of the pants. And a kid, and we had these huge, huge classes. My smallest class in grade school was 68, and the nun was the principal. We had 82 in 3rd grade, okay? And if a kid would start to misbehave, the nun would simply reach, and the kid would say, no, sir, no. That's as far as I ever saw the hand go, all right? Now, I always say, that's how we handled ADD in those days. No drugs, all right? Sit down and shut up, all right? Cut the nonsense out. So that. Another time, well, where's Monsignor Sal? Oh, okay, perhaps. Monsignor Pilato had me do the evaluations of the high schools of the Archdiocese of LA when he was superintendent. And so I was heading out there, it was January. And so I'm on a plane from Newark to LA, and I'm sitting there, waiting, people get on, and a family got on ahead of me in the row ahead of me. And the husband sort of nodded some kind of a greeting, and we took off, and we got to LA actually early. And it was early January. And we're standing there and they couldn't get the darn plane door open. And so it's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes, and people then actually have to start to talk to each other, And so the guy turns around and looks at me, he said, Father, are you from New Jersey or California? And I said, New Jersey. He said, oh yeah, we are too. And I said, is this your final destination? And he said, no, he said, actually, we hope we're gonna get the connecting flight. We're going to Hawaii for winter vacation for the family. I said, oh. I said, where are you from in Jersey? He said, Rumson. Now, if you know anything about Rumson, the poor people there live in $300,000, $400,000 homes, and they're the cleaning people for everybody else in the town. And I said, oh, Rumson, yeah. I said, I know that. I said, Holy Cross. Yeah. I said, do your children go to Holy Cross school? And he said, no. I said, well, where do they go? He said, oh, they go to the local public school. And I said, why is that? And he said, really? I said, I find that fascinating for a few reasons. I said, one, Holy Cross School, I think it's been Blue Ribbon School for about 25 years, right? I said, last time I heard the tuition was $5,000 per kid, and with a family rate after the second kid. I said, and I wasn't a math major in college, but I'm doing some quick figures here. And my guess is that this winter vacation is probably costing you 30 or 40K. And he said, well, Father. I said, I do, and that's the problem. Right? But where's his pastor, you see? That parish has maybe 200 kids in the school and probably 800 kids in CCD. What's the problem there, huh? That number should be reversed, right? Why do you have that? And why did I, a stranger, have to say, you got your priorities screwed up, mister, all right? But that's something that the pastor has to be able to say publicly. And I've said repeatedly, until bishops and pastors are willing to publicly challenge the priorities of parents, we're never going to be where we're supposed to be. And also that bishops and pastors are prepared to say publicly, submitting your children to the government schools is endangering their souls. And now, why do priests hesitate to do that? Well, there are 3 pressure groups in the church that a priest is afraid of. First of all, the CCD lobby, okay? In one diocese, just last year, the unbelievably stupid archbishop decreed that a CCD coordinator must get the same salary as a school principal. So making felt banners twice a week, you get the same salary as someone who's dealing with 500 kids 30 hours a week. Imagine. And it was started $82,000 a year. Pastor in that, one of the pastors in that diocese, a friend of mine said, I wrote to the archbishop and I told him I'm resigning as pastor and naming myself the CCD director. Right? And see, we wonder also about clergy morale, right? Imagine, right? CCD director, $82,000 a year. Right? So the first lobby is the CCD lobby. The second group, that's a pressure group against a pastor, making a statement like this, is Catholics who are public school teachers. And then the third are the parents of kids that go to public schools. I was speaking in the Denver Archdiocese at a parish. I was there to do a teacher workshop, and the pastor said, "Can you come for the weekend and preach at the masses to promote the school?" And I was the celebrant and the homilist for the vigil mass. And in the middle of my homily, an entire pew got up and walked out. So after mass, I said to him, "Who were those people?" He said, "Oh, that's the family of the principal of the local public grammar school." And I said, "Oh," and he said, "Good." He said, "Yeah, no problem. Keep saying the same thing for the next 3 masses." Right? But that's the problem. Right? See, if you're afraid to have those kinds of confrontations, but you got to do it. I mean, there's no other way. Then in terms of how the priest can interface with the broader community beyond the church. One time in Boise on a Monday morning, secretary says, the owner of the Bon Marché, that in the Northwest, that's sort of like Macy's, right? The owner of the Bon Marché is on the phone, he wants to talk to you. And I thought, oh Lord, any of you have been in school administration, a Monday morning call from a department store, this is not a good thing, you know. I know one of our kids caught, you know, shoplifting or who knows what. So I get on the phone and I said, yes, and he said, Father, this is so-and-so. Yes, he said, I was wondering, this must have been about March or April. He said, I was wondering, what about, would you be willing to let me advertise to your students that I'm looking for summer help, high school kids? And I said, oh. I said, are you doing this with all the high schools in the city? He said, oh God, no. And he was a Mormon bishop, by the way, right? I said, oh, and he said, oh, no. So I just want Bishop Kelly kids. And I said, and why is that? And he said, well, your kids will know how to dress. They'll be respectful. They won't steal anything. They'll know basic math. They'll be courteous. And he went down this whole list of things. And I said, oh, I said, I'm glad you think that. Sometimes I wondered. And I said, but I'd be happy to do that. But would you write me a letter to that effect? And he said, sure. So a couple of days later, I get the letter. And remember the old mimeograph machines?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you'd smell it to get a nice cheap high out of everything. And so I duplicate, yeah, he's too young to remember, know about that. That's a generational thing. And so I duplicated his letter and sent it home to all the parents. Well, one of the parents apparently brought it to the city newspaper.
Oh, no.
And that became the headline. Head of Bon Marché disrespects public high schools of the city. So I called him, I said, you know, and he said, you think I care? But that was our public image, right? And that's so important. And it was, you know, he contacted me to say, I know what your kids are like, and I want them. And I mean, and that did, you know, tremendous good for us for an awfully long time. Conversely, in another situation, again, because we were the only Catholic high school in the state, I said to our kids, you know, there's a burden placed on you that doesn't exist, for example, in the Northeast, or even here in Florida, where, for example, you know, in Philadelphia, Catholic high schools only play Catholic high schools, all right? And you pretty much have something similar, I think, in the New York area. And so I said, but here, you know, wherever you go, you're a witness for the Catholic Church as a 13, 15-year-old kid. I mean, you gotta be, and so at games, I never want to hear booing of a call of a ref, no improper language, you know, nothing, all of it. And as it turned out, our school was hosting the basketball state finalists games. And it was the beginning of cable television. And there was, so the guy had the gym set up, the TV guy, the cameras were here, the action was going in that direction. And I was standing behind the camera watching what was going on. And we were in a double overtime, and the ref made a very, very bad call. And our star player, behind his back, gave the kid, the ref, the middle finger. Now, nobody in the gym saw that. I saw it because I was watching it on television, which means everybody in the state was seeing it. So I went over to the coach and I said, call a timeout. Oh, father, I said, call a timeout. I said, he's to be removed from the game. Why, we need him. I said, he's to be removed from the game. And I told him what he did. And he said, well, nobody saw it. I said, well, actually, I saw it. And 100,000 people in the state just saw it. He's out. Well, I'm not pulling him out. And I said, he's out or you are. Make a choice. And we lost by 1 point. And the next day, a kid said to me, you made us lose the state finals. I said, no. Craig is the one that made you lose. If you want to beat up somebody, beat him up, okay? But I got calls from around the state for a week of people saying, I'm a Mormon. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I'm a this. Boy, I'm so proud of what you did. Well, we stood up for something, we represented something, and that made a big difference. So that's another aspect of the public face of an institution. So those are just some, as I say, random thoughts. And as Father Michael said, this is a very open-ended possibility that's here. And the only limitations are the limitations you put on yourself. And creative thinking, huh?